One.
Good afternoon, greetings, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you're tuning in from. Today marks our 4th live stream. Right now we have our 2 admins with us. We have John Angus Martin, Steve Lewis, and today Craig Cochrane will be presenting a lecture on connecting cousins using DNA. So again, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Hi, everyone. I think we're waiting for a few people to join. We have about 3 of us, but I'll go ahead and get started because this will be recorded and viewable on YouTube and Facebook afterward. So thanks for inviting me, Philip, Steve, and Angus. It's my pleasure to present today on how to use genetic genealogy to connect with cousins and then collaborate together to kind of supercharge your personal genealogy and build your family trees together. This is part 2 of a series on genetic genealogy, and the first video was fantastic by Jada Ben-Torres, and her video is on YouTube and in the Facebook group. And her perspective was around kind of the large-scale genealogy of entire regions. And this part 2 is about your personal genealogy. And today I'll be speaking really quickly because I have a lot to cover, and just know that you can always watch the video and go over certain parts. And we can share my screen now, and I'll get started. Okay. So here we are. I am a grandchild of the Caribbean. All of my grandparents were born in various places in the Caribbean, and I am doing this, interested in this endeavor to stitch together the past, because we all run into kind of a common theme, which is my grandparents never told me anything, or you know, the records were lost and I don't know anything. And I think with genetic genealogy, we can overcome all of those hurdles, and we can overcome them more quickly by working together in groups. So just a quick recap of what I've done over the past few years. These are my great-grandparents, and when I began, I didn't know the identity of 2 of them. And then I found who they were, and am in touch with their current day other descendants. And I've also developed more of an understanding, a deeper understanding of Barbuda, which we already began with an understanding of that, because we had a lot of family history from my grandparents, my great-grandparents from Barbuda. And then I discovered a lot more about Grenada, and that's actually my next project, is to flesh out more about these 2 great-grandparents and their parents. I have their names, but I need to know more about them. And so what I'm about to show you today is, I'm going to start off with some technical things, the fundamental concept of genetic genealogy. So what Ancestry and 23andMe are doing exactly when you take a test, and how they're telling you, how they are telling you what they're telling you. Then I'll take a tour of DNA results. I'll use my account and my father's account. And then I'll talk about our collaborative cousins group that we have created. A lot of our cousins, we all stem from a few family names that began on Canawan in the Grenadines, and we have gathered together and we are solving the tree together. And then at the end, I have a little call to action for everyone in the group. So I'll begin with the fundamental concept behind genetic genealogy and what the tests are showing you. So this diagram is kind of a conceptual diagram. There's a lot of science underneath this diagram that I'm not going to get into, but there are notes that you can dig into if you'd like to. So these 2 ovals are called your autosomes. Everybody has them. They are filled with your genes. Your mother fills one and your father fills the other one when you are conceived. And then they form pairs. So you can imagine tiny little horizontal lines between these two, and the pairs are linked that way, and those genes operate together. So a gene from your mother operates with a gene from your father to create you and all of your characteristics. So let's look at how these are made. So let's say that this is the mother and this is the father. Make a note that this light blue came from the mother's mother. The dark blue came from the mother's father. Similarly, this purple came from the dad's father. This one came from the dad's mother, and this one came from the dad's father. So let's see what happens when they make a baby after they do the obvious. This cap has to be filled, so the mother could have given this light blue or this dark blue. She ended up giving the dark blue, which came from her father, and so on. So for the next region, it could be one of these. This time, her mother's genes went out. This time, her father's genes went out. And for this last one, her mother's genes went out. And now it comes time for the father to create his half. And the same process happens. This is illustrating the chance element. When you are created, you get half of each parent's genes, but you don't get the other half. And a lot of people forget that you don't get the other half, and that's really important to keep in mind. So now that this child has been created, you can see that it has genes from both parents. It also has genes from all 4 of its grandparents. And just to keep this going, here's another person. The same thing happened with them and their parents. They decide to have a child together. And then this person has to fill this half. This person has to fill this half. Same process happens. And then let's say this child and this person and this person have a child. Same process happens. Now, let's take a closer look at this latest generation. This is, let's take a look at where this came from. This light blue came from this person's great-great-grandmother. Notice how there's only a little bit here. This great-great-grandmother is kind of getting crowded out over the generations. Meanwhile, this great-grandfather, this shade of green, is very much staying present. This great-grandfather, brown, is also getting crowded out. And if you look into the future, you can imagine that when this person has children and grandchildren, this ancestor may disappear altogether. So may this one. This one might still be present. So the point is that there's an element of chance to DNA inheritance. And with each generation, some ancestors are crowded out and some are overrepresented. And you have to hold that thought for later, because when we take a tour of the DNA results, this concept will come up. And the fact that you can collaborate with your genetic cousins can overcome this kind of absence of certain ancestors in your genes. So let's talk a little bit about exactly what it means to share some DNA with someone else. So here are 2 random people who take a DNA test. Ancestry and 23andMe and MyHeritage will do this conceptually. They will do this. They'll say these 2 people have the exact same sequences of genes in the same locations. They have to be related. And how much of this DNA in this circled DNA, how much of it is measured in a term called centimorgans, and it's abbreviated CMs. And all you need to know is that is a measure of kind of volume, or how much you share with someone. And so I want to go back. So that that pink and yellow mean that these people do have one person in common in their family tree. They descend from the same person, and that's called their MRCA, or their most recent common ancestor. And you'll see that term being used. And basically what that means is this person back on our tree has to be their most recent common ancestor. That is the most recent person that could have given pink and yellow to the two people who matched. So this is conceptually what we're doing when we're building a tree. We don't think of it this way usually, but this is what we're doing from a genetic perspective, is identifying where your genes came from, who's the last person that could have given two different people the same genes. So hopefully that concept made sense, and we'll keep that in mind. But right now we'll just switch over to the tour of results. I'm going to first talk about the big two. Some people would say the big three, but here we go. Ancestry DNA, 23andMe, and MyHeritage have different audience sizes. So this is by web traffic. So as you can see, Ancestry DNA has about 4-5 times as much traffic and people using the website as 23andMe. And MyHeritage is kind of right behind 23andMe. And here's another way to look at how size-wise the comparison. So these are my matches that are over 50 centimorgans. And that 50 centimorgans is just my arbitrary number. And 50 or more kind of means a closer relationship to you. So a third cousin, a second cousin, or more. So as you can see, for me on Ancestry, I have about 4 times as many matches that are this close on Ancestry than I do on 23andMe. And I have about 8 times as many on Ancestry as I do on MyHeritage. All of this to say is Ancestry is the largest pond. And if you are trying to build your tree and use genetic genealogy, you need to fish in the largest pond. So I heartily recommend beginning with Ancestry. 23andMe is the second largest pond. I have found matches that on 23andMe that I don't have on Ancestry because those people just happen to choose 23andMe. So I do recommend both. And then the thing with MyHeritage that a lot of people don't realize is that when you test with Ancestry or 23andMe, you can download your DNA file from them onto your computer. Then you can upload it to MyHeritage, and MyHeritage will give you all of your matches as if you paid for a test from MyHeritage, but you can do that for free. So I would always recommend do Ancestry or 23andMe, and then just upload to MyHeritage. You can pay MyHeritage a monthly fee to access some of their tools, which are very useful. But just to get a list of your matches, you don't have to pay for that. So now let's take a tour. I'm going to start with the part that is least useful for doing genealogy. But it's the part that most people are drawn to. And it's called your ethnicity. It's your ethnicity breakdown, but specifically within that, it's your recent communities. So I'm going to switch over to this account. This is 23andMe. This is my mother's account. This is her DNA, her genetic breakdown. The broad ethnicities are big. They're estimates. You can't really put much stock in this, and you really can't use it for very much. Quick example, when I first tested, I was 18% Congo and 13% Ghana. I actually went to Ghana. I spent a month in Ghana. I taught at a school in Koforidua, thinking I was, where my ancestors lived. Ancestry did an update. I'm 2% Ghanaian. So you have to take these estimates with a grain of salt. This is something that Jada also mentioned. It has to do with the reference populations in different parts of the world that they use to compare your DNA with and make these conclusions. And in sub-Saharan Africa versus Europe, there's an imbalance. There's far fewer people in their reference database for Africa. So these estimates shift and change. All that being said, one thing that is reliable is your recent ancestry. So for my mother, it is, I gotta sign in. For my mother, it is basically extremely accurate. It's saying that she is from Barbuda and Antigua, and that is exactly correct. Here we go. There's a little animation here that is being slow to start. But anyway, this little area usually zooms in on, it will zoom in on Antigua and Barbuda. Just a little visual. I find that these are extremely accurate. In my father's case, I'll switch over to him. And by the way, you can manage several people's DNA in one account, which is what I'm doing for my parents. And in my father's case, it's saying Jamaica and Grenada and Trinidad, and I know this to be true. I don't know why these images aren't coming up, but usually you would see just a little animation of the islands. So recent takeaway from this, excuse me, is that recent populations are, recent communities are accurate. Now let's switch over to 23andMe. Same thing for my mother. We're switching over to Ancestry. Ancestry is saying that my mother is from the Leeward Islands. And if we zoom in, it is circling here. It's not specifically saying Antigua and Barbuda, but it is correct. So it's a little bit less accurate than 23andMe. And my dad is saying, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. His mother is from here. His father is from here. They actually, a lot of people, including members of my family, did emigrate to Trinidad. So this is highly accurate. If we switch, interestingly, if we switch over to me, it's telling me that my recent communities are don't include Grenada. But I know that they do because my parents have tested. So again, these are highly accurate, but not completely accurate. So that's kind of the ethnicity and recent communities. I would just say, look at the recent communities. Take ethnicity with a grain of salt. Now let's take a tour of DNA relatives. This is the part where the rubber meets the road, to use a cliche. This is how you figure out a lot of things. So these are my dad's results. I'm going to scroll through them. First, I want to say that this is the centimorgan amount that I had mentioned on the previous slide. And we'll talk again about that in a second. And these circular dots are things that I added, and they are little categories that put each person under their correct tree, under their correct branch. So this yellow branch is one of my great-grandfathers. That's the most recent common ancestor for everyone that I've marked as yellow. Orange is my great-grandmother from Canaan. Everyone that I've marked in orange is somehow related through her. And then dark blue are my grandparents in Grenada from St. John province, and everyone that I've marked in blue I know are related through them. So this is called clustering. It's something that you cannot do on 23andMe, but you can do on Ancestry, and it is extremely helpful. So I'll just scroll quickly through my dad's results, and you can see I've clustered everyone into groups. I've blurred out names and pictures just for privacy. I do want to talk about the centimorgans number one more time. So here, this is my cousin. I know who she is. I know exactly how we're related. It is saying that we share 188 centimorgans. It is saying that we are third cousins in the third cousins category. And it's saying we're between third and fourth cousins. This is completely wrong. And one thing on Ancestry and 23andMe is you cannot use these categories at all. What you do instead is you take the centimorgan number, you go to a tool called DNA Painter Shared CM Project. You can Google it, but I'll give links at the end of the presentation. You enter the number here. These are the only possible relationships that I could have with this person. Since I know who she is, I know that this is our relationship. And this tool is extremely valuable because it will rule in and rule out different things. The challenging part is that when you share this much DNA with someone, you could be any of these relationships. So there's no way that you can know unless you develop your tree and the person fits on your tree and you know exactly what the relationship is. You can narrow it down to this little subset of possibilities. So again, don't use the categories on Ancestry or 23andMe, use this tool. The other very valuable tool in Ancestry is the ability to search by different things. In this search, I search for people with the surname Alexander in their trees. I search my matches, so people who genetically match me and my father. Among those people, who has the surname Alexander in the tree, and who has people who were born in Grenada on their tree. So it gives me this list of 5 people, and then I could actually go and click on their trees and investigate and see what is their connection to Grenada and the Alexander surname. And I could try to tie them to people that are on my tree. So this is extremely valuable, and it's only on Ancestry. And this is another benefit of fishing in the big pond, because you have many more people who have built trees, who are on the system, who have built trees. And so when you do a specific search like this, you're not going to come up with 0 people. You'll come up with a few for a lot of your searches, and you can kind of help connect the dots. And then the last thing I want to talk about before I get into our collaborative cousins group is shared matches. This is what led me to connecting to my cousins and forming this group. So this is my cousin June. This is my dad's first cousin. They share my great-grandmother. This is their grandmother as a most recent common ancestor. The beauty of their relationship is that they are half first cousins. This is the only person that they share in their history. So this is the only grandparent that they both share. That means that anyone who matches both of them also is related to my great-grandmother, which means they have a connection to Kanawha or St. Vincent somehow. So when I click on shared matches, I will get a list of all of these people. And I started reaching out to them a while ago, and several of them are now in our cousins group. And this is our cousins group. A subset of it we have meetings every Sunday on Zoom, and we go over the tree and we tie things together, which I'll talk about in the next few slides. This is the tree that we're working on. This is kind of a bird's eye view, not readable. This is one top of our Kanawha tree. At the top of this tree is William Snagg, who owned the estate on Kanawha he bought it in about 1802. I will kind of slide through the tree slowly. Everyone in our cousins group is descended from someone in this green bracket. And here we go. So we have Snaggs, Louis, Bethels, Telemox, Balfours, Cordons, Odie's. And this is kind of one of the focuses of our group is kind of fleshing out the area under that green bracket. And the tree, you know, it grows extensively from there. Now, this is the other top of our tree, and this is the Daroche tree. Some cousins say Daroche, some pronounce it Daroche. And there was a branch that went to Petit Martinique also. This is the branch that originated on Kanawhan. And I'll show you, for those of you who don't know, Kanawhan is one of the Grenadines, which are the little chain of islands between St. Vincent in the north and Grenada in the south. And the Grenadines are the little small islands in between there. So Kanawhan is one of those islands. So this branch I'll show you this tree. We'll just pan. We have Daroches, Lewis's, King, Farrell, Snaggs, Mary Daroches, McLawrence, Antrobus, Oliver, and a lot of us are under this branch as well. And we have Comptons. So this is this is a little video, there's no audio to this, of our cousin group in action. We do all kinds of things in the group. We talk about we basically talk about all of the family history that we all know individually to connect the dots. We have special guests on the call who are elders. So you'll see in this video our cousin Anna, who had her 92nd birthday a couple days ago, maybe 93, I can't remember. She was on the call, and she has a lot of information. Here she is here. She has a lot of information about growing up and who's who and who left for Trinidad, and a lot of it is whose child is kind of outside of a marriage, which is really important because then we need to find another person on the tree that's missing, that kind of thing. We go through our spreadsheet here where we we list how everyone is related to everyone else. And we can make conclusions such as a lot of us are related to this person here, and we know that this person is here on the tree. And since we are closely related to this person, we must be on this branch of the tree. So let's investigate that. Let's find birth certificates, marriage records on this branch. We aren't related to this person here. So this branch couldn't be the branch we're on. You can draw a lot of conclusions by kind of pooling your information and your set of matches like that. We also post photographs that we have of older relatives. Everyone has kind of old photos, and we don't know who they are in our families. So I posted a photo of my grandmother's aunt, and she turned out to be the great grandmother of a cousin in the group. And my cousin was able to tell me, oh, her name is Annie Snagg, and she lived on Beckway. And so that was something I would have never been able to know outside of this cousin group. And the last thing that I want to talk about goes back to what I was sharing earlier. So remember, these two people were related because they matched DNA here, right? Cousin A and cousin B. Cousin B and cousin C, they match here and here. But if you notice, cousin A and cousin C, they don't share any overlapping DNA. But they are still cousins. They just they didn't happen to inherit the same DNA in the same place from our pink and yellow ancestor. But because if all three of them understand how all three of them are related, cousin A and cousin C will know that they are in fact cousins. And so a lot of that is what you can get by working with your cousins and really understanding how DNA works. And as a concrete example, my father and his first cousin, June, there are people that my dad does not match. They're not on his match list. They are on June's match list. And they are also on cousin Anna that you saw in the video. They're on her match list also. So I know that my dad is related to that match because there's no possible way that June is related and Anna is related and my dad is not. So you can do all kinds, that's called it's a form of triangulation. And that's the kind of thing you can do when you are in touch with your cousins and trading information like that. And this is just a brief recap of what I was saying we do in our group. One thing I didn't mention is you do not need to know your family history to add value to a cousins group. Your DNA alone is useful. Just understanding how you match people is useful. So don't feel like if you don't know who your parents are, and we have a couple cousins in the group looking for a parent, their contribution to the group is very valuable. Also, when you start to form these cousin groups, you'll get local connections. So one of our cousins happens to know the registrar or the clerk in the records office, and we can expedite a few things. And we have cousins on the ground who can bring in special guests, the oldest people on the island who can tell us really valuable information. So that is another benefit of working with cousins. And then my challenge, and this is the last part of the presentation, is for you to consider how you would form a cousins group, and how you would go about it. And the way that I did it, it began with clustering my matches to understand who belongs together and who could be a group that could collaborate together. And so one of the things I would like to do going forward is form a cousins group for my Grenada branch. And I've already clustered my dad's results. So this dark blue circle, these are all people descended from Grenada. And I'd like to start reaching out and kind of forming a little group to kind of explore our shared ancestry and figure out in an ideal world who our most recent common ancestors are between each person. So that is how we have used DNA to connect with each other and then kind of supercharge our tree building by putting our heads together and meeting on Zoom and collaborating. We collaborate on Google Sheets and Google Docs, and we also collaborate. We have a WhatsApp group that we constantly chit chat on about things. And so here at the end are some links that I can put in the Facebook chat, and also when this is posted on YouTube, we'll put them in the description in YouTube. But there's a link to the DNA Painter tool that you can use to look up centimorgan amounts. There are 2 Facebook groups that I recommend that are all about genetic genealogy. I mean, of course, stay connected and engaged with the Grenada group. And there's also a larger kind of Caribbean genealogy group as well. But these are all about genetic genealogy techniques. And then here's just some below that are just some links to good sources for records and traditional genealogy. And then the last link is the International Society of Genetic Genealogy. And there is a starting point if you really would like to understand the science and understand kind of the science that were behind my conceptual diagrams at the start. That's a great place to start. So that is it. And and I look forward to answering your questions. And thanks for tuning in to this talk.
Craig, thank you so much. That was absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Great timing for me personally, because I've just had the findings from my ancestry DNA search, and also I've done the DNA through 23andMe, so I've got the two sets I can sort of compare and contrast, and I'm still building up a picture with that.
Upload to MyHeritage.
Oh, yes, I'll do that. That's another finding that I got from you. So thanks very much for that.
Real quick before you, I should also mention you can upload to GEDmatch, Family Tree DNA. You can upload to all of those places.
Well, I know what I'm going to be doing later on. So thank you very much. I do have a question though. Mm-hmm. Ancestry DNA. I mean, very, very powerful tool. They reach millions of people. Lots of us are using Ancestry DNA, and yet when it comes to the cousin match, they're not very accurate. So I was very interested to see this tool that you told us about. Why wouldn't Ancestry use the same tool?
I don't know. It is something that always comes up. For example, in the DNA Detectives Facebook group, I would say literally every other day, someone says, Ancestry is telling me this is my second cousin, but it can't be, blah, blah, blah. Yes. And it's like, you have to do the DNA painter and put in the number. Yes. So it's very confusing. The centimorgan number is extremely accurate. And so you can use that number, and then you can use what DNA painter tells you, and you can rely on that. It's just that the category labels that Ancestry decided to use are not, they're just more general categories. So you can't really use them. You'll also see that 23andMe has slightly different centimorgan numbers for the same match if you have a match that's the same person. And it's because they use a slightly different criteria for including what counts as a shared little DNA segment. They have a slightly different criteria for it. So their centimorgan numbers are slightly different, but when you put them into DNA Painter, you'll get pretty much the same possibilities and the same probabilities for each relationship.
We touched on this, I think, on the last talk that we had. But I was interested to see that it's quite possible that though you can be genetically related to someone, how many generations back, you may not share any DNA whatsoever. And the way you illustrated it made it very clear as to what happens by generation. How many generations could it be before you kind of lose contact, if you like, with an ancestor? I guess this happened over many generations.
Yeah, there's a great website. It's on that International Society of Genetic Genealogists. It basically is a chart that tells you the probability that you will not share DNA with third cousin, fourth cousin, fifth cousin, sixth cousin. Right. And it's a chart that breaks out the probabilities for each generation not sharing any DNA. And I can put a link in the comments there too. You could, if you search for ISOG, ISOGG, cousin statistics, it'll come up.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Angus?
Hey, Craig. Thank you so much for sharing this information with us. I think for me, I knew nothing about this. I did my DNA so I could find out the percentages, which you kind of downplayed. Which I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people want to know, what are the pieces that make up this person today? But can we put any kind of credence in the overall percentages for different racial connections or different geographical connections?
Yes, I think in certain such situations, for example, one scenario is you're adopted and you see that maybe one parent and that parent is white. Your ethnicity comes back as, 40% African. You would know that your father must be African-American or Afro-Caribbean or something. that's one example where you can do like a very basic conclusion. But once you get to, you can't do things like, let's say I'm 20% British. My sibling came back as 5% British. We're not really siblings. You can't do that. Like, you can't take these ethnicities and make any kind of conclusion like that. And I think a lot of people try to do that, and they try to do genealogy by ethnicity percentage, and you just cannot do that.
But doesn't the company tell us to do that though? That's why we're doing our test.
No, you have to look at your shared matches, and you have to build your genealogy through your shared matches and your centimorgans.
But I think when the stuff is advertised, they tell us, find out where you come from. They do these little commercials. They show you a guy in a kilt, and stuff like that he came from Scotland. So I think that's why a lot of us want to do it, because we do, especially if you don't know. If you haven't done any. So I think, and I understand there are issues with it, and but I was like, that's why I went into it.
Yeah, they say it's an estimate, and they really should emphasize the word estimate, and they do use estimate, and it changes frequently. I went from 3% Nigerian to 20% Nigerian, and 18% Congo to, I think, 4% Congo. And, they update. So, you would hope that the most recent update is more accurate as they get more of a reference population in their system, but it just shifts and changes. The recent communities, though, those are very accurate. So that's why I kind of showed those and highlighted those. The other thing that happens too, you mentioned people do a test and they just want to find their ethnicity, and they find out, and then they just kind of never log into their account again. That's the reason why when someone tries to reach out to a match on Ancestry, there's like a chatting platform on Ancestry and 23andMe. When people try to reach out to their matches, so many times they just never get a response. And a lot of that is because people take a test, find out their ethnicity, and they don't even look at their shared matches, and they don't even check messages and try to build a tree, because that's not what they were interested in. So just be prepared when you reach out to people. You won't get a lot of response sometimes.
Stephen, do you have a question?
I was really interested in hearing about the collaboration and the collaborative cousins. Again, it's something else I've got on my to-do list, because I've got little pockets of people who I've talked to over the years, but we've not really created a forum where we all talk together. And I was particularly interested to hear about the photographs, because my father's since passed, but he had a few photographs, and there are photographs of people that I don't know who they are. And my mother doesn't know who they are. But I'm sure if I posted them to a group like that, there'll be someone who knows somebody along the line. So I think a lot of learnings from your presentation. So again, thanks very much for that.
Sure. That makes me think of the urgency that's right now. Like, we have a little window right now, all of us, because we are currently living in a time where we can still talk to people who are in their 80s or 90s who might recognize a photograph from before our ancestors emigrated out. That won't be possible for our grandchildren. They won't be able to talk to anyone who can say, oh, that's so-and-so who married so-and-so. The other part of that is the thing we were talking about earlier, is that as cousins become fourth and fifth cousins, they just won't share DNA. So you just won't even match with your cousins that are descended from, Canawan or Beckway or wherever, or St. John or Saint whatever. You won't match with them in 30 years or so. So you won't even have a starting point to tie this together. So in my mind, like now is the time for us all to kind of get all of this together, because it won't be possible.
I've got a DNA match with someone who is 99.9% from sub-Saharan Africa, 96% Ghana. So Ancestry and me say that she's probably a fifth cousin, but then I know not to read into that it's necessarily fifth cousin. We'll look at the CM. But if I'm to talk to this person, would I be would it be advisable to get to know more about her family history in terms of a father's side or a mother's side, or I'm just wondering where that match is coming from? Does that make sense?
Yeah, you can do things like if she has a tree that she's built on Ancestry, you can look at her tree if it's public. My general approach is if it's someone who's a third, fourth cousin, I kind of just reach out. I know of other people looking for a parent. They make the mistake of immediately reaching out to very close matches, because when you're in a scenario where your parent might have had you outside of his or her marriage and you are the family secret, you don't necessarily just want to barge in and start contacting everyone. It's much better to work with a genealogist to figure out, to all you can through your genetic matches, figure out who you could figure out who your parent is, or you could say it's one of these brothers. Then you can strategically reach out to someone with the right message that's very carefully constructed, because, you know, that's kind of a bombshell. So I find a lot of people in that scenario, they immediately reach out, everybody shuts down, people make their accounts private. They just aren't able to proceed because they kind of jumped the gun. That's not the scenario you're talking about, but when you get to second, third cousins, I find reaching out is, you know, totally fine.
We have a question from one of our viewers. Do your ancestry ethnicity results tell you what info is specific to your maternal or paternal line?
That is from my cousin. Hey there. They do not. You would have to have both parents test, or an aunt. Abrielle, you can just message me, and we can just go over my mom's ethnicity, which would be the same as your mom's, and if you can get an uncle or an aunt on your dad's side to test, that would also tell you the ethnicity roughly from the other side of your family.
Okay. How long did it take you to establish a group, the cousins group?
I don't know. David Bryce, he's probably watching. Say hi in the comments, David, if you are watching. He and I talked on email way before I kind of knew what my clusters were, and we didn't know anything. But then maybe in August, with Doris, also in St. Vincent, the three of us had the first email, and then the idea came there, and then we invited Elaine in Canada, and I think that was the beginning of our group. And I was looking back in preparation for this presentation, and that was at the beginning of August. And as soon as we kind of proposed the idea of getting on a Zoom, it happened right away. And then we quickly grew. And even now, every week, we have new people coming on. So it grew pretty quickly. I think everyone's very enthusiastic and, you know, excited about it.
Okay. So do you have like a step-by-step of how do we create these groups?
I haven't written one out, but I'm happy to talk to anyone who's interested. I think some of the key steps is figuring out your schedule. whether it's going to be a Zoom meeting, which is what we do, and then you need some sort of online collaborative space. So we use Google Drive and we use a spreadsheet. And then we also use WhatsApp for the kind of everyday chit chat. We've actually just broken it into 2 groups. One's for chit chat, which is for fun and talking and getting to know each other. And then the other one is specifically for just genealogy, like discoveries and documents and that conversation only. So you don't lose track of the genealogy stuff, because that's the kind of thing you don't want to forget.
And
so those are key elements.
Okay. What would you say would be the best part of the group has been in terms of your collaboration for all these months you've been? What would you say is, wow, this is a good reason why we did this? And yeah.
I would say that getting to know my cousins. Then I would say the fact that you can just talk to someone and like fill out an entire branch of your tree in 30 minutes. Something that would have taken you, requesting marriage records from the registrar in St. Vincent and, pouring hours and hours of work can be condensed into a 30-minute conversation with an older person who just knew everyone. So that's a huge benefit.
Right. Where are all these cousins from? Are they primarily the Caribbean or?
Let me go east. Los Angeles, near Toronto, Canada, North Carolina, England, northeast England, St. Vincent, Canouan, Grenada, Trinidad, and I think I'm probably forgetting some other places, Massachusetts, all over kind of the English-speaking world, I guess.
Okay. I guess Caribbean people, we travel all over. We export people, as we say.
Yeah.
Somebody has a question. Could you go over again the DNA testing kit or DNA testing organizations, your recommendations? What you think is valuable in the different ones?
Yeah, Ancestry is the place to start because it has the largest amount of people using it. That's the biggest pool of potential matches for you. It also has the ability to cluster your matches. MyHeritage, you can also cluster, but it's a little bit different. But clustering and the size of the pool go hand in hand, because if you only have 50 matches, your clustering is not going to be very effective versus you have thousands of matches or hundreds of matches, and your clustering will be much more insightful. And then 23andMe has more technical tools. They have a chromosome map, which Ancestry doesn't have. That's more of an advanced technique if you really get into it. And then 23andMe, of course, has health information that Ancestry doesn't have, but the health information isn't really applicable to genealogy. So, it just depends on what you're looking to solve or do with your results. And then MyHeritage, the other thing about Ancestry is if you subscribe monthly, you get access to all of the records, and you get birth information, you get veterans, you get draft cards, you get naturalization papers, you get ships records, you get censuses. 23andMe doesn't have that equivalent of kind of a document database. Also, people tend not to create trees on 23andMe as much. They create trees on Ancestry. And so that whole thing I showed about doing a search of who of my matches has this surname in their tree and this people who were born in this location, that doesn't really exist on 23andMe. The interface doesn't exist. And also, even if it did, there aren't that many matches for it to search through. So it's a lot of different reasons to start with Ancestry.
Okay.
Mhm.
We have a question from a viewer. You mentioned Bethel. My mother is a Bethel from Petit Martinique. What's your relation to the Bethels?
That's a good question, and that's something we are solving. I mean, if any of our cousins in the chat have info about the Bethel surname, please go ahead and chat it. I have a match with the last name Bethel, and I know that Bethel is a spouse of someone on the kind of the top of our snag tree. Someone married a Bethel. That's really all I know about Bethel. That name hasn't come up, but there are so many surnames that come into play as you do this.
I know the Bethel name, I think, is actually exclusive to Petit Martinique.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we know that in the Grenadines, there's a continuous flow of people between the islands. There is no separation between Grenada and St. Vincent. It's the Grenadines. So, so somebody could have left from Petit Martinique to go somewhere else and interacted with others. So it would be interesting to see, where this connection took place. And you said you have an idea of where that is,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And incidentally, the person that asked that question, Billy Gerard Frank, I'm also a Frank descendant from Barbuda. So I don't know if you have Barbuda roots, but chat me.
Billy is from Petit Martinique. Actually, you watched this film not too long ago.
Yeah, great film.
Yeah, he's actually one of the people that work a lot with our group is Peter Redhead. And I guess you've also connected with Peter, in terms of and I think he's one of the people that we need to bring on, to talk about some of the work he has been doing.
Yeah, I'm a match to I believe his sister. She and I chatted on, I forget whether it was Ancestry or 23andMe. And then Peter and I chatted a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. I have a question here. Ancestry has helped me with my research over these past 20 years. Cheryl Hazel here, watching from Toronto, just bigging up. Great job, Craig. So.
Oh, Cheryl has been invaluable to our group. Cheryl has the largest snag tree, and it expands beyond. She's joined our cousins group about 3 weeks ago and has been so helpful. Yeah. Hi, Cheryl.
Do you have anything else you want to share with people before we say goodbye?
I'll just be in the group. So if you have questions, I'll be on the lookout, and I can elaborate on anything you think of later. But it's been such a pleasure to present all of this stuff, and I'm hoping that other people will kind of take our lead and start forming groups like this so that we can stitch together a more collective history.
We definitely appreciate you coming here and sharing this kind of information with you, because like I said, for me, I didn't know there was all these possibilities, with doing a DNA. And I think it's really nice that we could have this conversation, recognize that this stuff works so well, beyond the basic knowledge that we think we can get from this, but that there is just so much more, and exploring and connecting with people on a very different level, I think, taking it beyond the science part and going towards the people, which is, I think, the connections that we're generally looking for. When we do this genealogy, it's not just about finding out who this great-great-grandfather, but who are the people that come from them and connect, in these different places, because, you end up meeting people that are in places you've never even been, or, if you've never even been to where the original person may have come from, so I think it's really, really cool that you have been able to do something like this, and thanks so much for sharing it with us. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Definitely. Very informative.
As well. Echo those sentiments as well, and there's some great take-home messages that you shared with us. I think the use of that tool is going to be invaluable in getting a better understanding of what the relevance for CM is. I think the fact that if you've got Ancestry or if you've got 23andMe, you've also got access to MyHeritage as well, and GEDmatch. That's also an action point for me personally. The work that you've presented on collaborative cousins just makes so much sense. And with so many more people being at home because of various lockdowns around the world, it kind of makes the time and the scheduling this sort of meeting a lot more easier to manage. So thank you very much. It's been fantastic. Look forward to more with you on the group.
You know, it's funny. I think it's a I don't want to say benefit, but in our COVID world, with everybody suddenly having to use and get used to Zoom, the idea of having a Zoom meeting used to be strange, and now it's why not?
Yeah.
So I think it's a great time to start these groups.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I participated. I zoomed into a funeral yesterday, which is something I could never have imagined, but that's the reality of the times, so.
Yeah.
Craig, there is a question for you from Wayne Edwards. He says, very informative, as I've always questioned the reliability of DNA testing. As you have uniquely identified the advantages and disadvantages and where to start, basically he's saying thank you. Wasn't a question at all.
You're welcome.
Let's see.
Great.
Amma Saunders, she says, genealogy fleshes out the true story of a people in our region. So many interesting life experiences come out from the research. A lot of people saying thank you. Great information. Thank you, Craig. Very informative. So, yeah.
Okay, Craig. Great. So I guess I'm coming to have you help me form my family group.
Let's do it.
Me too.
Because I've done quite a bit of research on the Andrews family, and they keep waiting on me to do something, but we haven't got to the next level. So I'm going to tell them about Craig. So
great.
I actually, as you mentioned, Oliver, I have an entire family tree from the Olivers for Pity Martinique.
Oh. Really?
I'm not directly related, but cousins and in-laws. So I will definitely share that with you offline.
I should say, you can start a free account on Ancestry. You can begin your tree, and you don't have to take a DNA test. And you can start there, and you'll probably get hints from other people's trees, and you can start building it there. So there's a way to use Ancestry without taking a DNA test.
Okay.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. And let me know too, because there are shortcuts. If you have a GEDCOM file, which is a file format, you can just upload what you already have, and you don't have to retype in everything. And
no,
there's a lot of little.
It was all written out and given to me as a photocopy. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how we all started.
So, well, doesn't look like we have any more questions. I think the technology, the science, probably has a lot of people baffled, and they will have to rewatch it. I will definitely be rewatching myself.
Okay. And just know you only need one person in your group that understands that. So don't feel that that's a barrier for you to join or start or, get started.
Absolutely. I mean, I see, some of my cousins have joined the stream today that I've never seen join the stream. So it's nice seeing them be here.
Good.
Great. Yeah.
So I think that's it. Unless there's any other questions from either Steve or Angus.
I'm good. Thank you.
I'm good. Just thanks, and we really appreciate you coming on and sharing this stuff with us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for
the
presentation. Definitely, like I said, it was informative. I think people who will rewatch this will definitely benefit from it. And from what I can tell, We never streamed to YouTube before, but obviously there's
I think we
people
did.
who are viewing.
Yep.
So it can be watched in the Facebook group, or it can be watched on YouTube on our channel. So again, thank you for everyone who tuned in, and hopefully we will see you soon again with another stream. Don't know what the topic will be, but I'm sure it'll be just as interesting.
I guess we can ask people if they are interested in other topics, let us know.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Definitely.
So we can organize these. So.
All right. Okay. Somebody says, just now seeing this, congrats. As someone of Grenadian heritage, this is also fascinating. Special thanks to my relative, Philip. I'll let you.
That's you.
Are you still typing?
All right, Tessa in Barbados. Thanks for tuning in and sharing that with us.
There's somebody that wants to contact Angus in Grenada. I'm currently not in Grenada. I'm actually in Saba. It's a tiny island in the Dutch Caribbean. I can be reached on the page, I guess, or you could send me an email. Martin, MARTIN, JA64 @gmail.com.
Let's see. Topic, idea, connections between Bequia and Canawan, or Bequia and Grenada.
Yeah, I think we probably could do an interesting presentation on the Grenadines and the connection between both Grenada and St. Vincent. I think that could be interesting. In terms of there's a lot of cultural connections between those islands, and there's a lot of stuff going on between it because there's so many little islands, So yeah, there probably could be an interesting historical. I just read a paper on Baliso, as a site of memory because of what happened there in the 1790s, So maybe we could ask that individual, the anthropologist, the archaeologist who did that, to have a brief conversation about some of the different places, So maybe we could bring in people that have done work on different islands, Carriacou, Petit Martinique, and So that might be something to explore. Sure.
Absolutely. You were going to say something, Craig?
Yeah. One of my, I wanted to give a shout out to Young Buffalo. That's his nickname. He's one of our cousins. He's on the call. He's our honorary snag. He joins our calls. He's not genetically related, but he brings in the most amazing guests who tell us all kinds of information, and he lives on Union Island. And he might also be a good person to talk about the Grenadines. From
Emma is saying there's so much info I found from church records that I don't know if it's a he or a she, but that they've digitized and indexed over the past couple of years. So hopefully they can share that information with us. Do you know who that person is by any chance, Craig?
Yeah, we've spoken. I think Amma is she runs another Facebook group. I don't forget if it's Caribbean generally. Is that right? But yeah, we've spoken about genealogy in the past. Yes.
All right.
Oh, it's Cheryl. That's right. That's Cheryl. That is, I didn't know that was her nickname. I forgot. That is my cousin Cheryl, who is in our cousins group. Yes. Who has the amazing snag tree.
I think we need to figure out like what your group has done by making documents available in Google Docs. I think we need to figure out, even for our page, I think we need to figure out to make it better searchable and things like that.
Yeah, that's the problem with Facebook. Yeah, with Facebook groups, it's hard to maintain like a library that's organized and easily accessible. Like once something goes by in the feed, it's kind of sort of lost forever. I mean, there is a search function, but
Right.
It's not intuitive. So yeah.
We put up the information for Cheryl's group. It says my group is Caribbean Genealogy.
Yes. Great group.
And it's on Facebook. All right, gentlemen. I think unless there's any last hanging questions, guess we'll bring this to an end.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Again, thank
Thanks
you
very much.
Definitely.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.